They fined me 50 grand for building the one thing that kept their pretty lawns from turning into a swamp. The HOA president, Brenda Malloy Rolex, glare smile like a citation, showed up with a deputy and a fistful of official papers that smelled like printer ink and lies. I'm Ethan Cole, a retired electrician in Cedar Ridge, and that small gravity weir behind my fence wasn't a vanity project. It was the reason our cul-de-sac slept through storms. They threatened liens, jail, and humiliation. Fine. If they wanted the dam gone, I'd take it down. But while they flexed bylaws, I collected dates, video, rainfall charts, and a licensed engineer's seal. Because there's a difference between power and proof, and I was about to make them learn it the hard, wet way. Watch what happens when the people who tried to ruin me come begging for help. This is my story, and the ending is very, very expensive. Before we dive in, drop your city and local time in the comments, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the payoff. The storm that started it all didn't come from the sky, it came through the mail slot. A simple white envelope printed with the Pinecrest Meadows HOA logo sat on my kitchen counter between a stack of bills and a half-drunk cup of coffee. I almost ignored it. I figured it was another boring reminder about garbage bins or holiday decorations. But something about the red ink stamped on the corner UArgent notice caught my eye. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. Fine, assessment $50, 0, 0, 0. It didn't make sense. I read it twice then, a third time, thinking maybe the printer had added an extra zero. Nope, it was real, or at least it looked real. The letter accused me of unauthorized construction and alteration of community water flow. According to them, my little gravity weir dam, which had been quietly keeping everyone's yards dry for 2 rainy seasons, was somehow an act of rebellion against the gods of bureaucracy. 30 years I've lived on this property. I raised my kids here, patched every leak, painted every board myself. This house isn't just wood and wiring, it's the place where I thought I'd grow old in peace. That morning, that peace evaporated faster than a summer puddle. I grabbed the phone and called the number listed on the letter. It rang twice before Brenda answered. I could practically hear the smirk through the line. Pinecrest Meadows Homeowners Association, this is Brenda speaking. Brenda, it's Ethan Cole, I said, trying to keep my voice even. I just received a letter saying I've been fined $50,000. That has to be a mistake. She didn't miss a beat. Oh, it's no mistake, Mr. Cole. You constructed an unapproved water control structure that violates Section 8, subsection B, of our environmental maintenance regulations. I blinked. There is no subsection B. I've read the bylaws. The HOA never regulated drainage beyond curb maintenance. A pause. Then that syrupy, weaponized tone every HOA tyrant seems to master. Maybe you should spend more time maintaining your property and less time challenging people who know the rules. The call ended with a click. I sat there stunned, staring at the receiver. $50,000 for preventing their own flooding problem. Brenda's words burned like acid. People who know the rules. The truth, people like her didn't know the rules, they made them. That afternoon I went out to the creek behind my yard boots, crunching on the gravel path I'd laid myself. The dam was barely 3 feet tall, a mix of reinforced concrete stone and a small overflow channel that Nora, my engineer friend, had helped me calculate. It wasn't a barrier, it was a regulator. When heavy rains hit, the dam slowed, the surge directed the excess through a natural gully into the wooded area beyond. The system had worked flawlessly. Before I built it, every storm turned our cul-de-sac into a swamp. My neighbor Rick's shed had flooded twice, and Linda's flower beds used to wash away like sandcastles. The HOA had known about the problem for years. We'd filed requests, sent photos, even attended 3 separate meetings. The board's response: large-scale remediation is cost prohibitive. Translation, not our problem. So I made it my problem. I spent 2 months and a chunk of my retirement savings to solve what they wouldn't. My reward, a fine bigger than my first mortgage. I studied the letter again, focusing on the attachments. 2 grainy photocopies of what looked like county permits. The signatures were smudged, the county seal warped like someone had printed it from a low-resolution PDF. Something felt off. I pulled up the official Jefferson County seal online and compared them side by side. They didn't match. The font around the border was wrong, the mountain icon reversed, and the words Department of Environmental Control were spelled environmental missing the damn. That's when my shock turned into anger. They hadn't just fined me, they'd forged documents to justify it. But Brenda didn't realize who she was dealing with. I might be retired, but 40 years of working with electrical systems taught me one thing: when a circuit fails, you don't panic, you trace the fault. And I was about to trace hers. I started digging through old emails, years of HOA communication stored in my inbox like digital dust. I found messages from as far back as 2012, where residents, including Brenda herself, back when she was just the social events coordinator, had complained about backyard flooding. In one thread, a former board member even wrote, "Until we address runoff from the upper lots, residents like Ethan Cole will keep dealing with damage." Funny how that never made it into the newsletters. Over the next few days, I turned my home office into an evidence lab. Folders stacked by year-printed photos labeled with storm dates, receipts for concrete, and rebar screenshots of the county code. The deeper I went, the more obvious it became that Brenda's so-called permits were smoke and mirrors. Then, out of curiosity, I called the Jefferson County Water Management Office. The clerk, a polite guy named Aaron, looked up the document numbers printed on Brenda's attachments. After a brief silence, he said, "Sir, those permit numbers don't exist. We've never issued anything under those codes." That was the confirmation I needed. I wasn't just being bullied, I was being scammed. I spent that evening on my porch watching the sunset glaze over the creek. The dam hummed softly with trickling water. My hands shook not with fear but resolve. Brenda thought this was about money. It wasn't. It was about principle. About the idea that a woman with a clipboard and a fake county seal could ruin lives just because she enjoyed the power trip. Not this time. The next morning, I drafted an email to the entire HOA board. It was polite but firm. I outlined the history of flooding, the absence of legitimate permits, and attached photo comparisons of the county seals. I wrote, "I am requesting an immediate review of this fine and all supporting documents. Forged materials constitute criminal fraud under Colorado Revised Statute, Section 185102. I hit send. 2 days of silence followed, then a reply from a board member named Donna Briggs. Short, cautious, almost apologetic. "Ethan, I understand your frustration. I've raised this with Brenda, but she insists the documents are legitimate. My advice, if you formally apologize and submit a removal plan, she might consider reducing the fine. Reducing it, not canceling, not acknowledging the forgery, just reducing it if I bowed down." It was the perfect HOA logic guilt until proven broke. But Donna's email told me something important. There were cracks in Brenda's armor. Not everyone on that board supported her blindly. Some were just too scared to speak up. So I decided to widen those cracks. I spent the weekend building a new kind of file digital this time. I uploaded every photo, letter, video clip, and county record to a secure folder. I even backed it up on 2 flash drives, one of which I tucked into my old tool chest. If Brenda wanted a war of paperwork, I'd bring an arsenal, and then I waited. On Monday morning, the sound of tires crunching on my driveway pulled me out of bed. Through the blinds, I saw a sheriff's deputy stepping out of his patrol car, tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of guy who didn't smile much. Behind him, standing in her pastel blazer and oversized sunglasses, was Brenda. The sight of that grin, the "I own you now" grin, lit a fuse in my chest. Whatever was coming next, I knew one thing for sure she was about to regret: underestimating an old man who knows how to follow a current to its source. The deputy's boots left wet prints on my porch as he approached, a rolled-up notice in one hand, the other resting casually near his holster. Behind him, Brenda Malloy adjusted her sunglasses, pretending to check her phone like she hadn't orchestrated the entire scene. Her smug little smirk said it all. She thought she'd just won. "Mr. Ethan Cole," the deputy asked, monotone, professional, but clearly not thrilled to be here. "That's me," I said, keeping my voice steady. He handed me the folded document. "Cease and desist order. You've been cited for an unpermitted structure altering a natural waterway. You're required to begin removal within 48 hours. I stared at the paper. My own name looked foreign, printed under the bold heading "Defendant." "Deputy, this is a civil dispute," I said carefully. "The HOA forged documents to justify this." He shrugged. "I don't handle civil law, sir. The complaint's been filed. You'll want to take it up with your lawyer." Behind him, Brenda let out the faintest laugh, that polite, condescending chuckle HOA Karens reserve for people they think they've cornered. "Thank you, officer," she said sweetly. "We just want to keep the community safe." The deputy nodded, clearly done with the conversation, and walked back to his cruiser. Brenda lingered, tilting her head like a bird of prey. "You should have just followed the rules, Ethan," she said. "Now it's out of my hands." "Oh, I'm sure it is," I replied. "But the thing about paper trails, Brenda, they lead somewhere. And I'm very good at following circuits." Her smile faltered for the first time. The cruiser pulled away, splashing through a puddle, and I stood on the porch, clutching that notice like it was made of lead. The calm life I'd spent decades building was gone. Now it was war. I didn't waste a second. That afternoon, I called Nora Park, my old colleague from the power plant. Nora was a licensed civil engineer, retired, but still sharp as a tack. We'd worked together for 20 years. If there was anyone who could tear apart the HOA's fake narrative, it was her. She arrived 2 hours later, pulling up in her old Ford pickup with a steel toolbox in the back. "Heard you're fighting City Hall coal," she said with a grin. "Or worse, an HOA. You could say that." I laid out everything on my dining table: the cease and desist order, the fake permits, the photos of my dam, and my entire binder of evidence. She spent 20 silent minutes reading, only occasionally muttering under her breath, "Wrong font, bad seal, oh, this is amateur hour." Finally, she pushed the papers aside. "Ethan, these aren't even good forgeries. The county seal's skewed and this environmental oversight department doesn't exist. I checked while you were pouring coffee." "So they made everything up," she nodded. "Looks like it. But proving it isn't enough. You need to show that what you built is safe. That's how we win this, with engineering and data." We spent the rest of the afternoon out by the creek. Nora examined every inch of the dam, tapping the concrete, measuring the slope, checking the flow channels. Her precision reminded me of how she used to troubleshoot cooling systems back at the plant. "This isn't a dam," she said finally. "It's a gravity weir, the kind municipalities use for storm control. You built this right, Ethan. It regulates flow instead of blocking it. Frankly, your HOA should have paid you. Instead, they sent the sheriff." She smirked. "Then let's give them something better than threats. Let's give them math." Over the next 2 days, Nora turned my backyard into a field lab. We installed a staff gauge in the creek to measure water depth and flow rate. She brought out her tablet, logging every reading with timestamps. I set up a wildlife camera, aimed at the dam, to capture video proof during rainfall. By the time we finished, we had a full professional report, complete with diagrams, formulas, and photos. Nora stamped it with her Colorado engineering license seal. It was official, ironclad, and irrefutable. We printed 2 copies, one for me, one for the county. On the 3rd day, I emailed Brenda, and the entire HOA board attached is a certified engineering evaluation confirming that the structure in question meets all safety standards and reduces flood risk to neighboring properties. The forged county documents you submitted constitute potential fraud under Colorado Revised Statute 185102. I demand immediate rescission of all fines and withdrawal of the cease and desist order. I CC'd the county attorney's office for good measure. That night I slept well for the first time in weeks. But the calm didn't last. 2 mornings later, I found another envelope wedged in my mailbox. No stamp, just slid in by hand. Inside was a new violation notice. Unauthorized surveillance equipment, $10,000 fine. They were fining me for the camera I'd installed to record the dam. According to Brenda's letter, I was invading the privacy of neighboring residents. The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. She was spiraling, and that meant she was scared. I wasn't the only one who'd noticed. That evening, my neighbor Rick Dawson came by carrying 2 beers and a look that said he'd had enough. "Ethan, I saw the deputy at your house the other day. What's going on?" I told him everything: the fake documents, the new fines, the threats. He stared at me for a long moment, then said, "You're kidding. That dam saved my shed last spring, and she's calling it illegal, afraid so." He took a long swig of his beer, then nodded. "All right, that's it. Time we all stopped being scared of her." The next day, Rick and his wife Linda went door to door gathering signatures from other residents whose properties had benefited from the dam. Within 48 hours, they brought me a letter signed by every homeowner along the creek. It read, "We, the undersigned residents of Pinecrest Meadows, confirm that the dam constructed by Mr. Cole has mitigated flooding on our properties and poses no hazard to the community. We support his efforts to retain it." That letter changed everything. Emboldened, I created what I called the HOA harassment log. It was a 1-page guide for neighbors to document every petty violation notice, every threat, every email from Brenda. I printed 20 copies and slipped them quietly into mailboxes after dark. If Brenda wanted a paper war, I was going to arm the entire neighborhood. The following week, the tone around the cul-de-sac shifted. People who used to look away when Brenda drove by now waved at me instead. Small, defiant acts, but powerful ones. That's when Brenda escalated again. One morning, I stepped outside to find 2 brand-new high-definition cameras mounted on the streetlight across from my house, both aimed directly at my property. One pointed at my front door, the other zoomed in on the creek. She was spying on me using HOA funds, no doubt. I called Nora immediately. "She's losing it," I said. Nora chuckled. "Good. The more she overreaches, the easier she'll fall. Just keep recording everything." So I angled my own camera, slightly capturing her new surveillance setup perfectly. If she wanted a staring contest, I was ready. A few days later, my camera caught something even better, Brenda pulling up in her Lexus meeting a maintenance guy in an unmarked white van. The man climbed the streetlight with a ladder fiddled with one of the cameras while Brenda pointed toward my house. The whole exchange played out in crystal clear 1080p. I couldn't hear them, but I didn't need to. Her intent was obvious. 2 days later, another violation notice appeared, this time accusing me of unsecured construction materials. The attached evidence photo was a blurry picture of my wheelbarrow and 2 bags of cement supposedly left in the open. Only problem: that morning, those materials had been locked in my shed. I had video proof timestamped an hour before the photo's alleged time, caught red-handed again. Every move she made, every fake violation she filed, I documented. The folder on my computer was now several gigabytes, deep labeled Pinecrest evidence. And yet, despite everything, the pressure was starting to weigh on me. Constant letters, threats, the fear of losing my home. Some nights I'd wake up at 3 a.m. just to check the dam's camera feed to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that the structure was solid and safe. Nora kept me grounded. "Ethan," she said one night over dinner, "bullies always push hardest before they break. Keep calm. The facts are on your side." She was right. But facts don't mean much when the system itself is bent. A week later, Brenda played her boldest card yet. Another police visit, another complaint. But this time she wasn't accusing me of building illegally. She accused me of trespassing on HOA land. When I stepped outside, Deputy Collins was there again, expression unreadable. "Mr. Cole, the HOA claims your dam sits partially on community property. They've filed for an injunction." "Community property," I repeated, stunned. "That's my land. I have the original deed from 1971. Brenda appeared again, clutching a map, a brand new one conveniently redrawn to shift the property line just enough to include the creek under HOA jurisdiction. That's when I realized she wasn't just abusing power. She was forging real estate boundaries. It was the final straw. If Brenda wanted a legal fight, she was going to get one in front of the cameras, the county, and every neighbor who'd ever been silenced by her fake authority. And this time I had all the proof I'd ever need. Brenda didn't waste time. The day after her trespassing complaint, she filed for an emergency injunction, claiming the dam sat on shared community land. The court, flooded with paperwork and zero context, rubber-stamped the order. 72 hours. That's how long I had to demolish the structure or face contempt charges. It felt surreal. One woman's arrogance had turned into state-backed tyranny. My mailbox overflowed with HOA notices, each one printed with her smug signature. The final envelope wasn't even pretending to be polite. Failure to comply may result in property lien or incarceration. I stood in my garage staring at the concrete tools I'd used to build the dam, now preparing to use them to destroy it. My wife Ellen leaned on the doorframe. "Ethan, maybe it's time to stop," she said softly. "You've done enough." I looked at her, the same woman who'd painted this house with me 30 years ago, who'd lived through every storm and flood. "If I stop now," I said quietly, "she wins. And she'll just do it to the next guy." Ellen sighed. "Then at least be smart about it." Smart. That word stuck with me. So instead of rushing, I made sure everything was documented. I filmed the entire demolition, every crack of concrete, every shovel of broken rock, every drop of runoff. I wanted proof that I had obeyed the order, because Brenda's kind always rewrites history. When the last piece of stone was cleared, I sent a single-line email to the HOA. "The dam has been removed as per court order." EC Brenda didn't reply. She didn't need to. She'd gotten what she wanted, or so she thought. That night, thunder rolled in. The kind of storm that made the windows hum. Heavy, angry clouds rolled over Cedar Ridge, dropping sheets of rain, so thick the streetlights looked like glowing ghosts. I stood by the kitchen window watching the water pool where the dam used to stand. By midnight it was obvious what was happening. The creek, unrestrained, now began to surge. The water turned muddy, then foamy, then violent. By 2 a.m., it had swallowed half of Rick's lawn. When the sun rose, Cedar Ridge looked like a war zone. Rick's shed was half submerged. Linda's garden was gone. The street itself was a river of brown sludge, and my phone started buzzing. "Ethan, my garage is flooding," Rick yelled. "You have to see this." I grabbed my raincoat and stepped outside. Water rushed across the asphalt like a living thing. The cul-de-sac's drains were overwhelmed, backing up into yards. And down by the creek where the dam once stood, the ground had collapsed into a deep gully, pulling fences and mulch down with it. Nature had delivered poetic justice, fast, brutal, and undeniable. I didn't smile. Not yet. I just started recording. For 2 straight days, I filmed everything. Drone shots, ground shots, time-stamped videos. I interviewed my neighbors, every single one of them describing how the flooding returned the moment the dam was gone. Rick stood in knee-deep water beside his half-flooded shed. He tried to stop this, he said into my camera. The HOA forced him to take it down, and now we're paying for it. Linda pointed to her ruined patio furniture now lodged against a tree. They called it an eyesore, she said bitterly. Now it's a disaster zone. Every clip told the same story, a neighborhood that had ignored reason and a board president who had weaponized bureaucracy until it drowned her own community. I compiled all of it into a neat, devastating folder. Then I made one phone call. Channel 7 investigates. This is Tanya Reed. Her voice was brisk sharp, the kind of reporter who smells blood in a press release. Miss Reed, I said. My name's Ethan Cole. My HOA used forged permits to fine me $50,000 for a dam that prevented flooding. They forced me to destroy it. Now the entire neighborhood's underwater, and I can prove everything. There was a pause. Then, you can prove forged documents. Yes, ma'am. Stamp dated side by side with county originals. She exhaled slowly. Okay, Mr. Cole. You just got my attention. By the next morning, Tanya and her cameraman were standing in my living room sipping coffee while I laid out the evidence like a courtroom exhibit. First came the fake county permit. Her cameraman zoomed in on the warped seal, the misspelled department name, the wrong font. Then the side-by-side comparison with the legitimate Jefferson County version. Tanya raised her eyebrows. This isn't sloppy, it's criminal. Next, the footage. We watched the creek before and after the dam's removal. The transformation was undeniable, peaceful stream to raging flood. Then, the signed witness statements from my neighbors, Nora's engineering report, and the video of Brenda meeting her contractor under the streetlight. When we finished, Tanya looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and fury. They forged legal documents, harassed you with fines, and got law enforcement to enforce it. That's about the size of it, I said. She nodded, jaw tight. All right, let's tell your story. 2 days later, it hit the 6 o'clock news. The segment opened with drone footage of the flooded neighborhood, muddy water lapping at driveways, gardens destroyed. Tanya's voiceover cut in a local homeowners association is under fire tonight after allegedly using forged government documents to fine a resident $50,000 and force the demolition of a flood control structure that protected multiple homes. Then came my interview. Calm, factual, unflinching. I didn't rant, I just showed the truth. The camera lingered on the forged permits, the fake seal, and the line that read, authorized by Jefferson County Water Oversight Department, a department that didn't exist. Next came Nora's testimony. This was a professionally built weir, she said on camera. It posed no structural risk. In fact, it prevented exactly the kind of flooding you're seeing now. Finally, Tanya cornered Brenda outside the Pinecrest clubhouse. Miss Malloy, do you deny authorizing forged county documents? Brenda blinked, clearly unprepared for ambush journalism. I don't know what you're talking about. Everything we did was within HOA policy. Even the department that doesn't exist, Tanya asked, holding up a printed copy of the fake permit. Brenda turned on her heel and fled into the building. The clip went viral within hours. By the next morning, my phone was exploding with calls, neighbors, journalists, even local officials. The county confirmed on record that the permits were fake and an investigation was underway. For the first time, the silence from the HOA board wasn't intimidation, it was fear. That weekend, Pinecrest Meadows held an emergency meeting. Usually only a handful of retirees and busybodies showed up. This time, the clubhouse was packed, standing room only neighbors buzzing with outrage. I walked in with my folder Nora by my side, and Rick and Linda trailing behind me. Brenda sat at the front, flanked by the remaining board members, her face pale under the fluorescent lights. The meeting started like any other, a nervous attempt at control. Brenda cleared her throat. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone to remain civil. The news report was misleading. A voice from the crowd cut her off. You forged permits. Yeah, another shouted. You lied to the sheriff. The room erupted. Brenda banged her gavel, shouting, order, order, but no one listened. That's when I stood up calm as a still pond. Brenda, I said, holding up a printout of the fake map she'd given the deputy, is this your signature? Her eyes darted across the room. That's board standard. I clicked a remote and the projector screen behind her lit up with my security footage. Brenda standing by the streetlight instructing the contractor to install her illegal cameras. Gasps filled the room. The truth wasn't just out, it was inescapable. She looked around, realizing there was nowhere left to hide. Her voice cracked. This meeting is adjourned, but the board wasn't having it. Donna Briggs, the quiet member who'd once warned me privately, stood, "Madam President, I move for immediate resignation of Brenda Malloy pending legal review." A chorus of seconded followed. Brenda froze, then gathered her papers trembling. Without another word, she walked out. And just like that, her reign of petty tyranny ended. When the gavel struck again, it wasn't Brenda's, it was Donna's. She turned to me. "Mr. Cole," she said into the microphone, "on behalf of this community, we rescind all fines issued against you. And we owe you an apology." Applause broke out. Genuine, loud, cathartic. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. But I wasn't finished, not yet. "Apology accepted," I said. "Now let's rebuild what actually matters." The following week, the county inspectors arrived, real ones this time with proper permits and equipment. With their blessing, Nora and I began reconstructing the dam, this time with even better engineering. Rick showed up with his son to help mix the concrete. Linda brought sandwiches. Other neighbors joined in, laughing, covered in mud, working side by side. It wasn't just a dam anymore, it was a symbol. Proof that decency and evidence could outlast intimidation. When we finally finished, the new dam stood twice as strong. And as the spring rains came again, I stood on my porch with Ellen, watching the water rise, then slow, then flow harmlessly downstream. She smiled. "Looks like gravity's still on your side." I grinned. "Always is. Because in Pinecrest Meadows, justice didn't fall from the sky, it was built one stone at a time." For the first time in months, the neighborhood was quiet. No envelopes taped to doors, no urgent notices on red paper. Just the soft sound of water trickling through the rebuilt dam and the laughter of neighbors finally breathing again. But peace after war always feels fragile. The day after Brenda's resignation, I woke up to an inbox full of news alerts. Local HOA president under investigation for document forgery. The county had officially opened a fraud case. Apparently, Tanya Reid's broadcast had stirred up enough outrage that the district attorney couldn't ignore it. Brenda's fake permits had been traced to her home printer. She'd literally downloaded a county seal from Google Images, flipped it horizontally, and used Microsoft Word to write the rest. Amateur hour. She had forged her own downfall. Still, I didn't feel triumphant, not yet. What she'd done had real consequences. Rick's shed and lawn equipment were destroyed. Linda's patio needed rebuilding. And the HOA's reserve fund, the same money meant for landscaping and maintenance, was now earmarked for legal defense and property restitution. It was poetic, sure, but also chaotic. I spent that morning walking through the cul-de-sac. Everywhere I looked, neighbors were out with rakes and shovels cleaning up the mud. People waved, called out thank yous, even offered coffee. It felt surreal. These were the same folks who'd once avoided eye contact when Brenda turned them against me. Guilt has a funny way of rebuilding bridges. Morning, Ethan Rick called, waving a mud-covered glove. County guys came by. Said they're inspecting drainage again, but this time for real. You should have seen their faces when they realized the HOA never filed a single maintenance report since 2014. I smirked. Guess she was too busy printing fake ones. He laughed, shaking his head. Never thought I'd see her get knocked off that pedestal. Gravity always wins, I said. Later that week, Donna Briggs, now acting president, knocked on my door. She looked exhausted, but lighter somehow, as if she'd finally exhaled after years of being silenced. "Ethan, I wanted to thank you," she said. "And to ask a favor. Name it. We're drafting new bylaws. I need someone with common sense and a low tolerance for nonsense to help." I laughed. "Donna, I've spent the last 6 months fighting this HOA. You sure you want me inside the tent?" "Exactly why I do," she said, smiling. "You know where the cracks are. Help us fill them before someone like Brenda crawls back through." I thought about it for a long moment. For decades, I'd avoided HOA politics like the plague. But maybe that's exactly why people like Brenda rise, because the rest of us look away. "All right," I said. "Let's do it right this time." The first reform meeting took place in the same clubhouse where Brenda once held court. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Gone were the smug decorations and the president's corner bulletin board. Instead, we sat around folding tables with notebooks, laptops, and an honest agenda: rebuild trust. Nora joined as a technical advisor. She insisted every future HOA decision involving infrastructure or drainage must have a licensed engineer's sign-off. No more YouTube experts with clipboards, she quipped, earning laughter from the group. I proposed 3 new policies. Transparency rule: all fines must include time-stamped photographic or video evidence accessible to the homeowner within 48 hours. Accountability clause: any HOA action involving legal enforcement must have at least 2 board member signatures, no more one-person crusades. Financial oversight. Every HOA expense over $500 must be publicly logged online with receipts viewable by any resident. They passed unanimously. Donna looked at me afterward. This, she said, tapping her notes, is how we keep power honest. Meanwhile, Brenda's investigation deepened. Turns out the fake permits weren't her only creative accounting. The HOA's former treasurer discovered maintenance reimbursements totaling nearly $40,000, all funneled to a shell landscaping company under Brenda's maiden name. The money trail was as sloppy as her forged seal. The community outrage reignited. This time, though, it wasn't fear, it was clarity. People realized how easily apathy turns into tyranny when no one asks questions. Local news followed every development like a serialized drama. Tanya Reid's follow-up piece aired 2 weeks later, From HOA Havoc to Neighborhood Redemption. She stood by the creek as I explained the new safety system. Nora and I had installed double spillways, improved filtration, even a digital water gauge linked to the county flood alert system. "Do you ever think about how different this could have been?" she asked during the interview. "All the time," I said. "If they'd just listened, if they'd trusted evidence instead of ego, none of this would have happened. But sometimes you need a flood to wash the dirt away." It became the episode's closing quote. Then came the storm. A late spring thunderhead rolled in from the mountains, dark and heavy. The same kind of storm that used to keep me awake, waiting to hear the sound of rushing water. Only this time I wasn't worried. I stood at my kitchen window with Ellen, watching the rain cascade off the roof. The creek began to swell, curling around the rocks like molten bronze under the lightning flashes. The new dam held steady water, rising, then slowing, then diverting perfectly into the overflow channel Nora had designed. "Still think I should have stopped fighting," I teased. She smiled softly. "I'm glad you didn't. You were right. Gravity and truth have one thing in common. They don't take sides, but they never lie." The next morning, the neighborhood was dry, every lawn intact, every garden still blooming. Rick came by holding 2 cups of coffee. I checked the gauge flow levels, stayed below the threshold all night. "Thing's a masterpiece, Ethan. Tell that to the HOA budget," I joked. "They're the ones paying for it." He chuckled, then grew serious. "You know, people are talking about naming it after you." I groaned. "The Coal Dam sounds like a bad country album." He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his coffee. "Still, you earned it, maybe. But in truth, it wasn't my victory. It belonged to everyone who decided enough was enough. Everyone who picked up a shovel instead of a pitchfork, who replaced outrage with evidence." By midsummer, the legal case against Brenda concluded. She pleaded no contest to 2 counts of document forgery and 1 count of fraudulent misrepresentation. Her sentence, community service restitution and permanent disqualification from holding HOA office. The irony. Her community service involved helping clean drainage ditches under county supervision. Gravity's revenge served poetic and muddy. When I ran into her one day outside the county office, clipboard and hand-orange vest on, she didn't look me in the eye, just mumbled, "You were right." I didn't say anything. She didn't deserve the satisfaction of forgiveness, but I didn't need revenge anymore either. The dam standing strong behind my home was proof enough. Months later, as summer turned to fall, Pinecrest Meadows transformed. The fear that once hung in the air like humidity was gone. Families hosted backyard barbecues again. Kids played near the creek, safe for the first time in years. Donna asked me to give a small speech at the annual community meeting. I'm not a speech guy, but I stood up anyway, adjusting my glasses as everyone settled in. "Folks," I began, "I'm not here to talk about water or fines or bylaws. I'm here to talk about something simpler: ownership. Not the kind on a deed, but the kind you take for your choices. Brenda didn't ruin this neighborhood alone. She did it because we let her, because it's easier to ignore bad power than confront it. But when we finally did stand up, we didn't just save our homes. We saved our home." There was a pause, then applause, genuine, steady, and deeply human. When the meeting ended, Nora clinked her coffee cup against mine. "You just turned HOA reform into a TED Talk." I laughed. "Don't give them ideas. They'll start charging admission." That night, under the porch light, I took one last look at the dam. The moonlight shimmered on the slow, steady current, calm, balanced, unstoppable. All that chaos, all that fear, all that noise, and in the end it came down to simple physics: water finds its level, and truth finds its way. I turned off the light, went inside, and slept like a man whose storms had finally passed. Moral and closing reflection approx. 150 words. In the end, I learned something I wish I'd known decades earlier. Silence is the real flood. When good people say nothing, corruption fills the void. It doesn't take power to fight back. It takes patience, documentation, and the belief that truth like water wears down even the hardest stone. The dam behind my home isn't just concrete, it's a monument to persistence, to standing firm when you're told to give in. So if you're watching this and facing your own HOA, Brenda, remember you don't need to shout louder, you just need to build stronger. Now I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? And what's your HOA horror story? Drop it in the comments and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next time karma and gravity join forces. By autumn, the air in Cedar Ridge carried that crisp mix of pine and renewal. The HOA no longer felt like a lurking threat, it felt like a community again. Yet for all the peace, something inside me couldn't quite rest. Maybe it was the old electrician in me. After a short circuit, you don't just flip the breaker back on. You check the wiring, make sure nothing's still burning beneath the surface. And I had a hunch something was still burning. See, when the dust settled, I started digging deeper into the HOA's old records. Part curiosity, part paranoia. Donna had granted me access to the archive drive, saying, "If you see anything odd, let me know." So I spent evenings in my garage with a laptop and a pot of coffee, scrolling through years of PDFs, scanned invoices and meeting minutes. By the third night, I found it a spreadsheet titled Stormwater Maintenance, 2018. It listed thousands of dollars in contract work to a company called Greenshore Solutions, same fake company Brenda used for her shell payments, except the signatures on these invoices weren't hers. They belonged to Tom Reynolds, her old enforcer, the guy who'd once strutted around my backyard pretending to inspect my dam. I felt my pulse quicken. Brenda might have been the face of corruption, but she hadn't acted alone. The next morning I called Donna. "You sitting down?" I asked. "I'm in the middle of breakfast, should I be?" I told her about Greenshore, the fake invoices, the signatures, the pattern. Silence hung for a moment, then she said, "Meet me at the clubhouse in an hour." When I got there, she had the treasurer Phil Watkins waiting. He was the numbers guy, a quiet man who'd inherited Brenda's mess and was desperate to fix it. I slid my laptop across the table. He scanned the document, his brow furrowing. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "These checks were cashed last year. Look here, same routing number, different payee names. Whoever ran this skimmed at least $25, 000, from our maintenance fund." Donna leaned back. "Looks like Brenda wasn't the only rat in the pantry. Question is," I said, "how deep does it go?" That night I couldn't shake the feeling I'd tugged on another loose wire, and when you pull one wire, the whole circuit lights up. 2 days later I got a call from Nora. "You sitting down," she said, echoing my own words. "Always a good start," I said. "The county just finished their audit on HOA storm permits. Guess whose name appears as consulting engineer on 6 fake inspection reports?" My grip tightened on the phone. Tom Reynolds. Bingo. And Ethan, they used my old license number, the one I retired years ago. That was the missing fuse. Brenda might have forged letters, but Tom had weaponized credentials. He'd pretended to be an engineer to rubber stamp fake inspections and likely pocketed the money Brenda funneled through Greenshore. I met with Donna and Phil again that afternoon. When I laid out Nora's findings, Phil went pale. He signed off on half the drainage maintenance last year. If the county realizes those inspections were fake, they could fine us, not him. "Not if we prove it first," I said. "We document everything just like before. Chain of custody, timestamps, witness statements. We expose this on our terms." Donna nodded slowly. "You're right. Let's finish what you started." We spent the next week turning the clubhouse into an impromptu investigation center. I brought my old printer scanner combo, Nora contributed her laptop, and Phil dumped a mountain of HOA receipts onto the table. The pattern emerged fast. Tom had created a loop. He'd sign off fake storm maintenance, Brenda would approve it, and Greenshore Solutions would invoice the HOA for erosion control. Then Tom would cash the checks using a P.O. box registered to his cousin's address. Every detail, every name, date, and dollar fit perfectly. It was almost elegant in its stupidity. "Guess we know why he defended Brenda like a bulldog," I said. Donna exhaled through her nose. She was the front. He was the bank. Phil nodded grimly. "This time we don't go to Channel 7. We go straight to the county attorney." But before we could act, Tom beat us to the punch. 2 days later, I found a note taped to my front door. Just 3 words written in shaky black marker, "Drop it, Cole." No signature, no punctuation, just threat. I tore it off and laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. Bullies always think intimidation still works after the truth comes out. I installed 2 more security cameras that night, one facing the street, one aimed at the creek. I wasn't taking chances. Nora insisted on helping, and by midnight the system was live, motion-triggered, and cloud-backed. The next evening, the cameras paid off. At 1:47 a.m., my phone buzzed with an alert. I pulled up the live feed. There, in grainy grayscale, was Tom Reynolds sneaking around my side fence. He crouched by the creek holding a flashlight. For a moment, I thought he was trying to damage the dam, but no. He was cutting the camera wires near the streetlight. The same spot Brenda once used for her illegal surveillance setup. Gotcha, I whispered. By morning, the footage was backed up, time-stamped, and copied onto 2 drives. I handed one to Donna, the other to the sheriff. By noon, Tom Reynolds was in custody for trespassing and tampering with evidence. Sometimes gravity doesn't need help, it just needs patience. After Tom's arrest, everything unraveled fast. County investigators raided his house, finding stacks of HOA checks and blank permit templates. The fraud total hit nearly $75,000, enough to trigger felony charges. At the next board meeting, Donna read the findings aloud to a packed room. The residents sat silent, jaws, tight eyes darting between one another. For the first time, no one looked bored. "We let this happen because we trusted without verifying," she said. "That ends today." I took the mic afterward, more tired than triumphant. This neighborhood's been through enough storms, real and human-made, but every time the water rises, it shows us what's built strong and what's just painted pretty. From now on, we build strong. Applause filled the room. Real thunderous applause, not the polite kind. By winter, Pinecrest Meadows was unrecognizable. New bylaws passed unanimously. HOA meetings were live-streamed for anyone to watch. The treasurer's reports were posted online monthly. And best of all, no more fake fines, no more urgent envelopes, no more power trips disguised as community service. The neighborhood finally functioned like it should have all along, a collection of homes, not a kingdom. But for me, the closure came quietly, one snowy evening. Nora stopped by with 2 thermoses of hot cocoa, both steaming in the cold air. "Guess we can finally retire our detective hats," she said, sitting beside me on the porch. "Speak for yourself," I said with a grin. "I'm just waiting for the next Karen to declare war on physics." She laughed. "You'd think they'd learn by now you can't fight gravity." I watched the creek below, half frozen but still moving, always moving. The water found its path no matter what tried to block it. That's the thing about truth too, it might take time, it might twist and turn, but it always finds a way downstream. Weeks later, I got a letter from the county clerk. No red ink this time. It was an official commendation for civic diligence and community transparency. I pinned it to the fridge right where that first $50,000 fine had once hung. Same spot, opposite message. Ellen came up behind me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. "Looks good there," she said. "Think you're finally done fighting." I looked out at the snow falling over the dam, slow and steady, coating everything in quiet white. "Maybe," I said. "At least until the next storm." She smiled. "Then let it come. We've got proof and gravity on our side." Moral and reflection, about 150 words. This whole battle taught me something simple, but lasting justice isn't loud and truth doesn't rush. It moves like water, steady, relentless, shaping everything in its path. People like Brenda and Tom think power is about control. But real power, it's persistence. It's the courage to document, to question, to stand firm, even when they tell you you're wrong. Our HOA story wasn't about revenge, it was about restoration, about rebuilding something decent from what greed tried to ruin. So if you're out there watching this, wondering whether it's worth standing up to your own Brenda, remember this: you don't need to shout. You just need to record, report, and resist. Now, tell me your story in the comments. Where are you watching from? What flood, literal or otherwise, did you survive? And don't forget to subscribe, because this isn't the last time truth and gravity are teaming up. Winter faded slowly in Cedar Ridge, the kind of winter where the air feels like glass and everything moves a little slower, even gossip. But not this time. The arrest of Tom Reynolds had turned the HOA's once whispered dysfunction into front-page talk. The local paper ran the headline, "HOA, Scandal Deepens, Second Official Arrested in Pinecrest Meadows Forgery Case." You'd think that would have been enough to close the chapter. But it wasn't. Because what the papers didn't know, what even the county investigators hadn't pieced together yet, was that Tom hadn't been working alone, even after Brenda's fall. The week after the article dropped, Donna called me in a panic. "Ethan, we've got a problem," she said. 2 of the remaining board members just resigned out of nowhere. No notice, no explanation. They wiped their HOA email accounts clean. "Guilt's a powerful motivator," I said, pulling on my jacket. "Meet me at the clubhouse in 10. When I got there, the scene looked like a corporate crime drama. Papers scattered across the long oak table. Donna's laptop opened to the HOA's financial portal. Phil Watkins, the treasurer, sat beside her, pale and furious. They drained the reserve account, he said flatly. What, $58,000 gone? Transferred to a new account under a company called Crestview Consulting. Another fake contractor, he nodded. Same P.O. box Tom used. For a moment no one spoke. The air felt heavy, not with fear this time, but exhaustion. The kind that comes from realizing the storm you thought you'd weathered was just the eye of it. Donna rubbed her temples. I thought cleaning house would fix this. How deep does this rot go? As deep as we let it, I said quietly. But not this time. We've got everything we need to cut the power for good. That night I pulled up every document I'd ever archived. Brenda's fake seals, Tom's inspection forgeries, the Green Shore invoices, and now the Crestview transfers. It wasn't just a scandal anymore, it was a conspiracy. And the thing about conspiracies is they don't unravel, they collapse. The next morning I met Nora for breakfast at the diner off Route 34. She looked amused watching me stir my coffee like I was trying to decode it. Still fighting dragons, huh? She said. More like rats in suits, I replied. The last 2 board members cleared out the account. I want to take it straight to the DA. Do it, she said, without hesitation, and I'll testify again if needed. You've got data, timestamps, paper trails, that's how you win. So that afternoon, Donna, Phil, and I walked into the Jefferson County Courthouse carrying 2 thick binders labeled Pinecrest Evidence 2. The DA's office looked like something out of an old cop show, dark wood file, stacks of smell of burnt coffee. Assistant District Attorney Malik Owens, a man with kind eyes and the posture of someone who'd seen too much nonsense, flipped through the pages, nodding slowly. This is airtight, he said after 15 minutes. Forgery wire, fraud, embezzlement, maybe conspiracy to defraud a homeowners association. You people did half my job. Just don't let them slip away, I said. Oh, they won't, he assured. And Mr. Cole, for what it's worth, I wish every neighborhood had someone like you. I laughed softly. You mean someone too stubborn to quit, he smiled. Exactly. The following weeks were a blur of subpoenas, depositions, and awkward HOA cleanup meetings. The county seized the Crestview account, recovering most of the stolen funds. Tom, still awaiting trial, struck a deal to testify against the 2 resigning board members, a couple named Derek and Melissa Hanlon, who turned out to be Brenda's cousins. Yeah, it ran in the family. The case hit the news again. Tanya Reid aired a follow-up special titled The HOA That Fought Back. She interviewed Donna, Nora, and even the county DA, turning Pinecrest Meadows into a symbol of accountability. When she asked to interview me again, I hesitated. Tanya, I'm not looking for attention. I just wanted my peace back, she smiled. That's exactly why your story matters. So I agreed on one condition: she also feature the reforms we'd built since. When the special aired, it wasn't about scandal. It was about redemption. It showed the new HOA rules, the live-streamed meetings, the shared community garden we'd started on the old empty lot. Kids laughed in the background while neighbors waved to the camera. The closing shot was of the creek calm flowing gently past the new dam and my voiceover saying, "You can't vote against gravity, but you can choose how you stand when it pulls." The broadcast hit over 1 million views on YouTube. But justice, as it turns out, doesn't arrive in a neat ending. A month later, Brenda Malloy's sentencing took place. I went not to gloat, but to close the loop. The courtroom smelled faintly of old carpet and fluorescent lights. Brenda sat at the defendant's table looking smaller than I remembered, her confidence deflated like a cheap balloon. When the judge asked if she wanted to make a statement, she stood. "I was trying to protect the neighborhood," she said, her voice trembling. "Maybe I went too far, but I never meant for it to become this." The judge's gaze was cold. "Miss Malloy, you fabricated permits, forged county documents, and weaponized your authority to extort your neighbors. Intent doesn't erase consequence." She was sentenced to 18 months of probation, restitution payments, and 300 hours of community service. Ironically, her assigned task, maintaining drainage infrastructure under county supervision. When court adjourned, she turned toward me for a brief second. I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I just looked at her, not as an enemy, but as a warning of what happens when power goes unchecked. After the trial, life at Pinecrest finally stabilized. The HOA balance sheet was transparent. The board meetings turned into genuine discussions instead of witch hunts. Nora and I even helped organize a small workshop for nearby HOAs on community accountability. The room was full of people nodding, taking notes, sharing stories about their own Karens. It was cathartic and a little hilarious. One man stood up and said, "So what you're telling us is, build a dam and film everything." Nora smirked. Exactly. One rainy April morning, I woke to a knock on the door. It was Rick holding an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. He grinned. Read it. Inside was a formal HOA letter, but this time not a fine. It was a community vote announcement. The proposal renamed the creek retention system the Coal Weir. I groaned. "Oh, come on, too late," he said. It passed unanimously. The dedication happened the next weekend. The sign was simple: the Coal Weir, built by neighbors, protected by truth. Kids ran around splashing their boots near the edge, and for once nobody yelled at them. Donna gave a short speech about resilience and transparency. Then she handed me a small plaque. For courage, patience, and refusing to bow to bad power. I didn't have much to say, but I managed a few words. It wasn't courage. It was just gravity and a little stubbornness. Everyone laughed. That night back home, I stood by the window as the rain returned, not the stormy, destructive kind, but the soft, steady kind that makes everything smell new again. The water flowed perfectly over the weir, glinting under the porch light. Ellen came up beside me. "Looks peaceful," she said. "It is," I replied. "Took a few floods to get here, but it's finally flowing right." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't fought?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "We'd still be underwater, maybe not literally, but in every other way." Outside the creek, whispered through the night, the sound steady and unbroken. The neighborhood had changed not just in bylaws, but in spirit. People said hello now. They helped each other. They watched out for newcomers instead of spying on them. And maybe that's the real victory, not the court case, not the dam. But the shift, the understanding that decency only works when you maintain it like a structure constantly carefully together. Moral and reflection around 150 words. This chapter of my life reminded me that justice isn't just about laws, it's about people deciding that enough is enough and then doing something about it. HOAs, governments, workplaces, it's all the same system at heart. Power without transparency rots. When Brenda fell, it wasn't revenge that won. It was accountability. When Tom was arrested, it wasn't luck, it was evidence. And when the neighborhood finally stood together, it wasn't just unity, it was evolution. So if you're watching this and thinking, it's just a neighborhood fight, think again. It's never just that, it's about dignity. It's about home. Comment where you're watching from and tell me, what's your damn story, the thing you built to hold back the flood until truth could rise. Because remember, you can't vote against gravity and you can't fake integrity for long. Spring in Cedar Ridge had a rhythm, a kind of heartbeat made of rain. It always started the same gray clouds crawling over the Front Range, the smell of wet pine drifting through open windows, and the creek whispering warnings just before the first storm. But that year, the rhythm felt different. The air wasn't anxious anymore. The water didn't threaten, it promised. For the first time in years, the neighborhood looked forward to the rain. The Coal Weir, that humble slab of concrete and rock that had once nearly gotten me arrested, had become a source of local pride. Kids came down after school to drop sticks and watch them float through the runoff channel. Neighbors brought visitors to show off the engineering marvel of Pinecrest, as Rick jokingly called it. Even the county inspectors, the same ones who'd once carried clipboards in suspicion, now smiled when they visited. "Never thought we'd see an HOA dam that works," one said, snapping a photo for their training materials. "Still, peace in suburbia is like still water. It looks calm, but you always check for ripples." And one started forming the day the county sent me a letter, stamped property assessment update. I opened it over breakfast, expecting the usual boring appraisal notice. But halfway down the page, a line made my coffee go cold. "Your property value has increased by 38% due to improved environmental infrastructure and water management features Coal Weir." I blinked. 38%, that's insane. Ellen looked up from her paper. "Isn't that good? Good if we're selling," I said, rubbing my temples. Terrible if we're paying taxes. A week later, Rick got his letter, same increase. Then Linda. Then half the neighborhood. By the end of the month, everyone's property taxes had skyrocketed. People were panicking. "We fought the HOA just to get robbed by the county," one neighbor shouted at a community meeting. "How's that fair, Donna?" called an emergency board session. We gathered in the clubhouse again, that familiar place of both chaos and resolution. She opened with the obvious. "This is an unintended consequence," she said. "The county's reasoning is that our flood control system has made properties more valuable." Nora leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Translation: because we made the neighborhood safe, they want their cut. Rick slammed his palm on the table. "We can't afford this. Half of us are retirees on fixed income." I sat quietly thinking. For once, the storm wasn't in the sky, it was on paper. That night I went through the county code. Hours of reading fine print until my eyes ached. Somewhere around midnight, I found a clause under the Colorado Revised Statutes Section 391103. Infrastructure improvements undertaken by private entities for the benefit of community safety may qualify for limited tax abatement if the improvement was constructed as a non-commercial project. Non-commercial project. That was the key. I called Donna first thing in the morning. "I think we can fight this," I said. "If we prove the coal weir was built by residents for safety, not profit, the county has to reduce the assessment." She hesitated. "Ethan, we just survived one legal war. You want to start another, not a war," I said. "A correction." She sighed, then smiled faintly. "You just can't sit still, can you?" We drafted a petition citing the statute. Nora attached her engineering report. I included every document proving the dam was self-funded and volunteer-built. Within 2 weeks, over 100 residents signed. Then, in true HOA drama fashion, the county scheduled a public hearing. It was held at the Jefferson County Courthouse, same building where Brenda had once stood trial. History apparently has a sense of humor. When our case was called, I stepped up to the podium with Donna beside me. The panel of assessors sat behind their long oak table expressionless. The lead assessor, an older man named Mr. Dunham, adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Cole," he said, "you're requesting an abatement for what is by all definitions a structural improvement that raised local property values." "That's correct," I said, "but it wasn't commercial. It wasn't commissioned by the HOA or a developer. It was a citizen-built safety measure that fixed a county drainage failure. You can't punish homeowners for solving a problem your department ignored for 20 years. A ripple of murmurs filled the chamber. Mr. Dunham frowned. "Do you have evidence of this claim?" I handed him a binder, my favorite weapon. Inside were photos, timestamps, emails, engineering diagrams, and county reports from the 2000s listing unaddressed stormwater management concerns. He flipped through them in silence, the tension thick. Finally, he looked up. "We'll review this and make a decision within 60 days. 2 months of waiting again. Meanwhile, the story leaked to the media. Tanya Reed showed up at my door one afternoon, microphone in hand, camera guy in tow. "Ethan," she said, smiling, "seems like you've become the accidental face of civic reform." I laughed. "That's one way to say old man who won't let things slide." She grinned. "Mind if we film a short segment titles from HOA villain to county hero?" I sighed, then nodded. "Sure. But make sure you spell weir right this time." The segment aired a week later. Neighbors gathered at Rick's house to watch it. There I was on TV again, same calm tone, same message. "I'm not fighting government," I said on camera. "I'm reminding it who it's supposed to serve." The comment section online exploded. Some called me Colorado's HOA Avenger. One user wrote, "Some heroes wear capes, others pour concrete." I printed that one out. Then, 60 days later, the letter came. After review of the submitted documentation, the Jefferson County Property Assessment Board hereby grants a 100% abatement of the value adjustment related to the coal weir project. Property values will revert to pre-improvement rates. I read it twice, then a third time, just to make sure it wasn't another forgery. It was real, Donna cried when I showed her. Rick opened champagne in his driveway. The entire cul-de-sac erupted in cheers. This man Rick announced, holding up the letter like a trophy, built a dam, fought a fraud, and beat the taxman. Somebody get him a medal. I laughed, embarrassed but proud. "I'll settle for a quiet summer," I said. But life as usual had one last twist waiting. 2 weeks after the abatement victory, I received an invitation in the mail. It was from the Colorado Department of Civil Infrastructure. "You are hereby invited to present a keynote address at the annual Community Engineering and Resilience Conference in recognition of your civic initiative in sustainable water management." Me, a keynote speaker. Nora thought it was hilarious. "Guess your dam went viral," she said. "I'll help you write your speech. Just don't start it with, 'So my HOA tried to find me 50 grand. Why not?' I grinned. That's the truth." So I went. Standing on that stage in Denver, looking out at a room full of engineers, city planners, and community leaders, I felt an odd mix of pride and disbelief. I wasn't supposed to be here. I was just a retired electrician who got tired of watching people drown in bureaucracy. I started my talk simply. This isn't about a dam. It's about what happens when ordinary people decide to fix what's broken, even when the people in charge tell them not to. The audience laughed, then listened. By the time I finished, they stood and applauded. Nora caught up to me afterward, smiling. "Told you you'd kill it." "Yeah," I said, still dazed. "Now let's hope they don't ask me to build another one." When I got home that evening, I walked down to the creek one more time. The water shimmered under the sunset, gold over gray stone. A family of ducks had made a nest by the overflow channel. Life calm and simple, flowing forward. I thought of Brenda, of Tom, of every storm that tried to drown us. I thought of gravity unbothered and eternal, quietly keeping score. And I realized something: revenge might feel good, but resilience feels right. I smiled, turned off my phone, and let the sound of running water fill the quiet. Because for the first time in a long time, there was no more flood to fight, only peace to keep. Moral and reflection around 150 words. If there's a lesson buried under the mud and concrete of this story, it's this: fixing something isn't rebellion, it's responsibility. Too often we wait for permission to do what's right, forgetting that systems only work when people do. The coal weir didn't just redirect water, it redirected a community, from fear to pride, from silence to strength. Maybe that's what justice really is: not punishment, but prevention. Building something that outlasts the storm. So if you're listening wherever you are, remember, stand your ground, document everything, and never underestimate what one steady, stubborn voice can do. Now tell me, where are you watching from tonight? What's the storm you're holding back? Drop it in the comments. And don't forget, gravity's always on your side if you build on truth. By late summer, the story of Pinecrest Meadows had become something of a legend. Reporters called it the HOA. Revolution podcasts dissected it, and local universities even used it as a case study on grassroots governance. For a while, I thought the saga was finally over. The water flowed steady, the meetings ran on time, and not a single fine was issued in months. But quiet has a way of attracting noise. It started with a single email. The sender name was unfamiliar: B. Graves. For a moment, I thought it was a coincidence. Then I saw the address: brenda.malloy@protonmail.com. The subject line was short: "You never really won." I stared at the screen, my pulse tightening. The email itself was only one sentence long: "You took my neighborhood, my reputation, and my life, but the HOA still owes me, and soon you'll see how much." No threats, no specifics, just venom. I deleted it, convinced it was an attempt to rattle me. But when the second message came 2 days later from a new account, same tone, I knew this wasn't random. Brenda was out there somewhere, still stirring the mud. I forwarded the messages to Donna and Nora. We agreed to keep them private, at least until we knew what was going on. Brenda had finished her probation months ago. She was legally free. The question was, what did she want? A week later, the answer arrived, not in an email, but in the mail. A thick white envelope stamped "Notice of Claim." Inside was a lawsuit. Brenda Malloy was suing the HOA and me personally for emotional distress, defamation, and destruction of livelihood. Her lawyer's letter accused us of conspiring with the media to publicly humiliate her and of falsifying documents that led to her conviction. I almost laughed until I saw the demand: $500, 0 inches damages. Donna called an emergency board meeting that night. It felt surreal, like déjà vu from a different lifetime. Same room, same faces, same air of dread. "We can't ignore this," she said. "We'll need counsel. I've already called the HOA's insurance rep. Do they even cover lawsuits from convicted fraudsters?" Rick muttered. The rep's answer came fast and firm: "Not this one. This is personal litigation. The HOA can support Ethan as a witness, but not as a defendant." In other words, I was on my own. I called a lawyer named Marcus Thorne, a calm, sharp man with a dry wit who'd helped a friend of mine years back in a boundary dispute. After reading the claim, he smirked. "She's bluffing," he said. "No court in the state is going to side with someone convicted of fraud. But that doesn't mean it won't be messy." "How messy?" "Public messy. She wants headlines again. You beat her in law and logic, so now she's fighting in the court of noise." The hearing started in September. Brenda appeared with her attorney, a slick young guy with too much confidence and too little conscience. She looked different now, thinner eyes sunken but burning with the same defiance. Her opening statement was pure performance art. She claimed we'd conspired to destroy her livelihood, that the news coverage ruined her future job prospects, and that she'd been subjected to years of psychological torment from online harassment. Her lawyer added, "This is about redemption. Miss Malloy only seeks acknowledgement that she was unfairly vilified." When it was my turn to testify, Marcus whispered, "Stay calm. Truth doesn't shout." I took the stand, laid my hands flat, and told the story again: the forged permits, the fake fines, the police threats, the dam, the floods. This time I didn't sound angry, just tired. Then Marcus presented the records, the original county emails, the forensic report proving Brenda's digital signatures on the falsified documents, the video footage from my security camera showing her with the fake inspector. The courtroom was silent, except for the soft clatter of keys as the court reporter typed. When Marcus finished, he said simply, "Your Honor, if Miss Malloy feels her reputation was destroyed, it was by her own hand." Brenda's lawyer tried to object, but even he looked pale. The trial dragged for weeks every session, a reminder of how fragile victory can feel when someone refuses to let go. But eventually the judge dismissed her case with prejudice, meaning she couldn't refile. It should have felt satisfying. Instead, it felt hollow. Watching Brenda walk out, muttering to herself, I didn't see a villain anymore, just a person swallowed by her own need to win. Outside reporters waited for quotes. I just said gravity took care of it and walked past. Back home, I sat by the creek again. The weir glimmered under the moonlight, steady, eternal. Nora joined me, handing me a thermos of coffee. So she said softly, "Is it finally over?" "I think so," I said. "At least the fighting part." "Good, because the water's calm, but your blood pressure isn't." I laughed, shaking my head. "You sound like Ellen," she smiled. "She's right. For a long time we just listened to the sound of the water." Then I said something I hadn't admitted before. "I used to think revenge was the best ending," I told her. "But the longer this went on, the more I realized peace isn't when they lose. It's when you stop caring if they do." She nodded. "That's wisdom." Or exhaustion. Sometimes they're the same thing. A month later, the HOA held its fall festival, a simple event with food, trucks, music, and a charity raffle for local flood victims. Standing there, among neighbors laughing and talking, I realized something beautiful. No one was afraid anymore. The dam, once a symbol of defiance, had become a reminder of unity. Kids wore t-shirts that read, "You can't vote against gravity." Someone even sold mugs with my face cartooned on them. They got my nose wrong, but I didn't complain. At sunset, Donna gave a short speech. Tonight, she said, we celebrate not just survival but growth. We learned that accountability isn't about punishment, it's about progress. The crowd applauded, and someone started chanting my name. I waved them off embarrassed, but my heart swelled anyway. Weeks later, I received one last piece of mail from Brenda, no threats this time, just a short handwritten note on lined paper. "You were right about the water. I tried to fight everything, the current, the truth, even gravity. I lost because I never learned how to let it flow. I'm leaving Colorado for good. I hope you rebuild what I broke." I sat there for a long while reading it over and over. For the first time, I believed she meant it. I folded the letter, placed it in a box with all the others, the fines, the notices, the court orders, and carried it to the fireplace. The paper curled, blackened, and vanished in a puff of gray. Outside, the rain began again. That night, as the storm rolled through, I stood by the window and watched the weir hold strong, steady against the rising flow. The water surged, then settled exactly as it was designed to. Ellen wrapped her arm around my waist. Still watching it, she teased. "Always," I said. "It reminds me how even chaos follows rules." She smiled. "And now?" "Now," I said, "we rest. When the storm finally ends, it doesn't ask who was right, it only shows who stayed standing." Brenda's final act taught me something I didn't expect. Not every enemy deserves a battle. Some deserve silence. Some deserve forgiveness, if only to free yourself. Peace isn't built by punishment. It's built by letting go, by trusting that gravity, justice, and time will all do their work without your constant hand on the wheel. So if you're watching this carrying your own storm, remember, sometimes winning means walking away dry when everyone else is still splashing in the mud. Tell me where you're watching from and what kind of storm you've survived. And if you ever find yourself facing your own HOA Karen, remember you don't need to outshout her, just outlast her. Because peace, like water, always finds its level. A full year passed after Brenda's final letter, and Cedar Ridge finally felt whole again. The air smelled different, cleaner somehow, like peace had a scent. The HOA no longer felt like a shadow over everyone's porch light. The board meetings were short, civil, and even a little boring, which in suburbia is the surest sign of paradise. But I didn't disappear into retirement again. Something in me had shifted. What started as a fight for my backyard had turned into something bigger, a reminder that small acts of resistance can ripple further than anyone expects. One morning, I received an email from the Colorado Community Association Network. They'd seen my conference speech and wanted to feature the Pinecrest story in their quarterly magazine under the title, "The Man Who Brought Gravity to Governance." I almost declined. I didn't like the idea of being anyone's headline again, but Nora convinced me. "It's not about you," she said. "It's about showing people they don't have to be afraid." So I said yes. The article came out in March. It painted me like some suburban crusader, which made Ellen laugh until she cried. "You a hero," she teased. "You still can't fix the toaster." "Hey," I said, mock offended. "I fixed democracy. The toaster can wait." The real surprise came 2 months later. A young man named Caleb knocked on my door. Late 20s baseball cap, clipboard under one arm. "Mr. Cole," he asked, nervous but smiling. "I'm from Crestview Pines. We've got a flooding problem and, well, everyone says you're the guy who knows how to deal with HOAs." I almost laughed, but the earnest look in his eyes stopped me. He reminded me of myself 30 years ago, tired, frustrated, but stubborn enough to hope. "Come in," I said. "Tell me everything." He did. Their HOA had built a new drainage ditch without permits, diverting runoff straight through 3 backyards. When homeowners complained, the board fined them for obstructing maintenance access. It was déjà vu in a different zip code. Nora came over that evening and the 3 of us sat around my kitchen table like a command center. We drafted letters, pulled county maps, cross-referenced ordinances. It was like watching an old engine spark to life again. "You sure you want to dive back in?" Nora asked quietly. I smiled. "We're not diving in. We're throwing a rope." Over the next few weeks, I helped Caleb's group organize, taught them how to gather evidence, request public documents, and keep every conversation documented. They formed a coalition of 20 homeowners, met with the county engineer, and within a month, the HOA backed off and agreed to fix the ditch. They sent me a thank you note signed by every resident. It said simply, "Because you taught us we don't have to drown quietly." I pinned it next to my county commendation. That summer, Cedar Ridge decided to host a regional community resilience fair where neighborhoods could share ideas on sustainability and civic transparency. Donna asked if I'd do a short presentation about the coal weir. I agreed, mostly because she promised free barbecue afterward. The event drew hundreds of people, HOA reps, homeowners, even students from the local college. My little talk wasn't about engineering or revenge this time. It was about trust. "Most fights start," I said, standing on the small outdoor stage, "because people forget that rules are supposed to protect us, not control us. We didn't beat our HOA by shouting louder. We beat it by keeping receipts." The crowd laughed, but they listened. And when gravity took over, I continued, "We learned something simple. Water finds its level, and so does truth. If you build strong, if you stay patient, if you document everything, you'll outlast any storm." When the applause came, it wasn't thunderous. It was steady, the kind that feels earned. After the fair, I found a quiet spot near the creek. The evening light was soft gold brushing against the rippling water. Kids were tossing pebbles downstream, shouting and laughing. I recognized the same laughter I used to hear from my grandkids years ago. Nora joined me carrying 2 paper cups of lemonade. "You realize," she said, handing me one, "this whole thing started because you couldn't sit still during a thunderstorm." I grinned. "Well, nature needed a little supervision." She laughed. "So what's next, Professor Cole? You going to start teaching HOA reform, God no?" I said quickly. "I'm finally done fighting. But..." I looked at the creek, then back at her. "Maybe I'll write it all down. So the next poor guy doesn't have to learn the hard way." So I did. That fall, I started writing a book, not a memoir exactly, but a guide disguised as a story. I called it "You Can't Vote Against Gravity: Tales of One Man versus the HOA. Nora helped edit, and Donna wrote the foreword. The publisher said it was oddly entertaining, which I took as the highest praise. When it hit local shelves, I didn't expect much. But somehow, it caught on, passed around, book clubs, local radio, even a few national talk shows. Turns out, everyone loves a David versus Goliath story, especially when David uses a GoPro. The royalties weren't huge, but I didn't care. I used every penny to start something I called the Homeowner Resilience Fund, a small grant program for families facing unjust HOA fines or fraudulent annexations. Within 6 months, we'd helped 9 cases. 1 in Arizona, 1 in Oregon, even 1 in Florida. Each one unique but all familiar. People standing up to petty power and winning with patience, not rage. By winter, life had slowed again. Ellen and I started taking long walks in the evenings. The weir always hummed softly in the background, a constant reminder that peace has to be maintained like a circuit or a current. One night, the snow began to fall quiet and clean. I stopped by the creek, brushed off the dedication sign, "The Coal Weir," built by neighbors, protected by truth. "You ever think about taking your name off that thing?" Ellen asked gently. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but it's not really mine anymore. It belongs to everyone who learned from it." She smiled. "You know, for a man who just wanted to be left alone, you sure started a movement." I chuckled. "Yeah, guess that's gravity too. You can't stop what's meant to fall into place." The following spring, I got one last letter from the county. It wasn't a fine or a summons, it was an invitation. The Jefferson County Board hereby names Ethan Cole as an honorary consultant for community infrastructure ethics and citizen oversight. I showed it to Nora and Donna, and they both burst out laughing. "You're officially the HOA whisperer," Donna said. I framed it, hung it next to the old $50,000 fine letter, the full circle of irony. One demanded silence, the other invited my voice. On the 1-year anniversary of the flood that changed everything, the neighborhood gathered again by the creek. There was no ceremony, just a sense of shared memory. Kids chased frogs, adults grilled burgers, and the water ran clear and calm. Donna raised her glass. To Ethan, she said. To gravity. And to never letting bureaucracy drown us again. Everyone cheered. I felt a lump rise in my throat, but smiled anyway. When the sun dipped low and the crowd drifted home, I lingered alone by the water. The light danced over the ripples, and I whispered, "We did it, old man," to the reflection of my own tired face. When I built that dam, I thought I was saving my yard. But I was really saving something bigger, the idea that one person armed with patience, evidence, and principle can still change a system stacked against them. The truth doesn't rush. It trickles, seeps, and carves its path through stone and stubbornness alike. Every lie Brenda told eventually collapsed under its own weight, because truth doesn't need force, it only needs time. If there's one lesson I hope outlives me, it's this: don't confuse peace with silence. Sometimes keeping the peace means standing up, documenting, and demanding the system works as promised. And when it doesn't, build something that does. So wherever you're watching from, whatever storm you're weathering, remember, you don't have to fight with anger. Fight with patience, fight with proof, and trust that gravity and truth are already on your side.